Well, hello everyone. Welcome to one of our webinars with our folks from TransPerfect. As always, we're very excited to have them join us and bring you content that is related to what you're learning in schools. So today we're really going to be talking about mentoring to develop the essential skills. So you all should be familiar with the essential skills by now, obviously, because that's what we talk about all the time. And mentoring, as you know, is one of our core practices and really lends itself well to developing the essential skills. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Dason, who's going to take it from here. And I'm going to be here in the background, trying to not jump in as much and let our panelists kind of discuss how they develop essential skills through mentoring.
Well, thank you, Manny. Appreciate you passing this over to us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We do appreciate you taking the time to connect and listen in on what we do have to share as far as these questions are concerned. If you do have any questions throughout the panel, throughout the conversation, please feel free to enter those in the chat and we'll address those as quickly as we can. To our panelists, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time and sharing on behalf of your experiences and the wonderful insight that you all have. We do have a few questions that we like to get to, and for anyone who does have a response to this or would like to take the lead, please do. Please feel free to. So our first question, do any of you currently have a mentor or a mentee?
Go ahead, Andrea.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I'm happy to kind of jump in with that question first. So I have a mentor currently. When I was in college, I belonged to a work study program, and I became really close with one of the ladies I worked for. And I think that really our bond really started because I recognized that she was someone that had a pretty similar background to me, and was, a few years older and had a little bit more experience, but still sort of within what I considered my age range where I could really relate. And I felt like she could really relate and understand me. And I think that had been, that really changed my world in college. Just having someone like that felt like someone I could really go to and connect with while being away from home. And I still am proud to say that we still have that connection. I think one of the things that makes that bond so strong is we've really stayed to our commitment of keeping up with communication. So regardless of what's going on in each other's lives, like we really try to cut out that time to just catch up and try to connect with one another and see where each other is at. And I've found that so impactful for me, and really sort of helping me reflect on where I've grown over those years. So yeah, that's kind of my experience so far.
Love that. So I think my current mentor is really someone who she was my manager actually at TransPerfect, and she's not at TransPerfect anymore, but it's a similar story in that she's a couple of years older than me. It's not that much of an age difference, but as a result, it means she was always just hitting that milestone right before me, which meant it was a little bit easier to talk to her about things than, say, my parents. If I needed to ask my parents a question about, finding a place to live in New York City, my parents definitely had no idea. They're from a rural community and I don't think have rented an apartment probably since they were in their early 20s. So having someone like that I could really rely on and ask questions of, I think has really helped me, especially when it comes to like building my leadership skills. I don't think I ever thought that I'd be here giving speeches basically and like on a panel. That seemed totally scary to me before. And I think through working with Courtney, I really developed that skill.
I was gonna say, really, I kind of have two main mentors. So my one is actually a former prof of mine. He is actually the reason I got into this industry in a weird way. So my former prof was a CIA agent for years, and he taught us the full CIA recruitment cycle. And I took about 5 or 6 classes with him on spies, intelligence, all of those communities. And so just like these random classes that I took for fun in undergrad, he also happened, because he's fluent in Russian because he spied on the Russians during the Cold War. He was always at Russian panel, which was one of my degrees I was in. So like I saw him all the time and then really started taking classes with him. And he and I just really bonded and clicked. And so over the years, he has, like, if I ever am trying to recruit someone and it's, hey, any new tips, anything that you've learned additionally that you can tell me, I can then go and take what he's taught me and apply that into my work setting. And he's also been a really great mentor for me now that I'm in grad school too. And it's hysterical because I'm getting my master's in international relations now. And ironically enough, his old boss at the CIA just guest lectured 2 weeks ago in my current class. And so I can literally talk shop on a call with these people I've heard about for over 15 years now and had no idea that that was the person that they were talking about. So it's like I've built this network, and he'll give me referrals of different academic people to reach out to, different institutions to reach out to. So in that respect, I have that. It filters into my work, but it's also like we're probably always going to have this working relationship of whenever I'm doing anything internationally, I bounce ideas off of him. And then my second mentor is actually the person who gave me the opportunity to do my internship right after college. And he is one of those people who is hired by Fortune 500 companies. And he comes in and he sees the problem and he's like the fix it guy. And he turns things around and works on processes and stuff. So he knows our industry. And so obviously, because of NDA, I can't really give anything away. But sometimes if it's a generalization, I'll be like, hey, I need some advice. Like, how can I deal with this team? How can I do something in this type of situation? And so he's able to give me advice. And he is actually the one who introduced me to LinkedIn. And so I surpassed him. It's basically like I became his Yoda now with LinkedIn, which is really cool. So those are just like my two experiences of school and then work. And then it's all just still like cyclical and integrated after all this time.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing such wonderful considerations of your mentors and the kinds of experiences that you've all had. I think it's really important to consider the kinds of relationships that develop out of those connections, and whether that be between you and your mentor or who they might introduce you to, the networks, as Megan had alluded to and shared on behalf of her experience. I think those are all things to keep in mind when you consider the people that you entrust with your experiences, and really seeking that kind of advice. I do have a follow-up to that, and just considering the timeline that you might have met this person. Do any of you recall who your mentors were in high school?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this question earlier today, and I think in high school I didn't necessarily define her as a mentor, but my best friend's mother was definitely a major mentor in my life. I have a whole lot of really wonderful memories of Debbie Needell, but she's a writer and she is the sort of person who kind of would always show us, the sky's the limit. And actually, it's really cool. Her daughter, who I'm still good friends with, has her first film hitting theaters on May 7th. It's called The Waterman, if anyone wants to check it out. But I think Debbie, as a writer, really pushed both of us to explore creatively, like how we could connect with others. And I also think she was really the first person to help me figure out how to even apply to colleges. My parents, being in a rural community, didn't necessarily have the knowledge there. And it was something that she really took the time to like sit down with us and go over. Um, and as a kid, I don't think I thought of her as a mentor because I'd known her since I was 7 and she was just my friend's mom. But I look back on how much our interactions shaped my life. And I do think, I learned a lot of early skills from her, especially when it came to teamwork and, agility, because her daughter and I were really close, but we would also get into giant fights over ostensibly nothing, but at the time it seemed like a really big deal. And I think the skills we learned together really helped me with teamwork later on when I got into disagreements with people as an adult.
I would have to say, so sort of similarly, but I would have to say my own mother, I definitely considered a mentor. And I think in the way that I didn't realize it at the time, but now looking back, there's so much of, who I am today because of what my mom sort of did and paved the way for. My parents didn't have an opportunity to go to college, and I was the first one in my family to have that opportunity. And so I felt this immense, I needed to sort of, I saw how hard my parents worked to make my life different than theirs. And so I sort of have always ingrained in me that desire to fulfill that and make sure that I'm working hard and nothing is sort of like handed to you. And you always have to kind of work for it. And I think that's definitely something my mom really taught me and showed me, and not as much taught or spoke. I would say definitely more showed, just through actions. When I was in high school, my dad actually got pretty sick. And so my mom had to sort of take on a second job to kind of keep our family afloat as well. And so, like I said, just showing me that and not necessarily saying anything about it, but just seeing that that's what you do, to kind of, pave the way for other people, was really meaningful. And I think that is still sort of an inspiration for me. And even, to this day, when I feel tired from work or, life feels like stressful, I kind of think back on that time and, what would my mom do? She wouldn't be complaining about it. It would just be, let's do what we have to do. So to me, that's a big mentor. And I think it really, shaped my thinking even now.
To add on to that, I kind of had three technically. So my journalism teacher in high school definitely became my mentor. I took a bunch of women's studies courses with her and journalism. We were a super small school where I come from. My graduating class had 63 kids in it. So we kind of made up classes based on interest, which is very unheard of, but was so cool at the time because it still followed Indiana state guidelines. Yeah, we got to learn what we wanted to learn about. And so it wasn't cool at the time to really like Harry Potter when I was growing up. So I was made fun of a lot. I was bullied a lot. And so there was a year that I ate lunch in the library every day. And every day she would come in and check on me to make sure I was okay. And like, she was that sounding board of people can be mean, don't give up, don't quit, just keep going. Similarly with my parents too, kind of like what Andrea was saying, my dad was involved in a really bad work accident when I was 14. He actually had his arm cut off. And so my first 2 years of high school, my parents were constantly just at the hospital, but they always made sure that they were always there for us. They made sure that we got where we needed to go. We got to every practice. And if we needed help with homework, they were there. And same thing, like if I ever had a problem or like when the bullying was going on, like as part of my dad's rehab, he had to go for walks. And like my dad would basically lecture me on these walks of like, look, not everybody's going to like you. You're not going to get along with everyone, but you just got to keep smiling through it because just think like in a couple years you could either be really good friends with them or you could leave and you can make new friends and it's a whole different world out there. And so like them putting that into perspective of you can stay here, you can go anywhere you want to do, you can do anything that you want to do, and they would be fully supportive of that. And like I talk to my parents about this all the time because like I live in Connecticut, they're in Indiana. They're like, you can go anywhere you want. You can do anything you want. There's no limit to what you can't do. Like if you want to be a ballerina astronaut, go for it. Basically, the sky's the limit.
Thank you again for sharing on behalf of your experiences. I think it's so incredible to hear about how the different things mentors have shared, whether it be back in high school or in a time that you're currently aware of, how they can have a lasting impact on you. And I think it's really powerful just to have that kind of guide in your life, to know if you're going astray of your path, that there's someone that's been there, someone that can help speak to your experiences or on behalf of theirs and help you back on track. I'm curious, based off of what you've all shared in terms of the impact that mentors have on you. Can you please talk about or share if there are anyone in your experiences that you have mentored and what that experience was like?
Sure. So I think I have a couple of mentees. Some are very formal and some are very informal. But I will say I think I get as much out of it as they do. A lot of times we're maybe about the same level if it's professional, or maybe we're similar in age. But occasionally, like I have someone that I talk to now probably every 3 or 4 days who started out as one of my interns. But they're someone from whom I learn a lot. They're someone who's very active in the community, who's very, very well read, and who has a lot of questions sort of about, moving up in their career. But at the same time, they have perspectives that I don't, that I think make me better at my job and just a better human in general. Like I really think a lot of the conversations that we have are super international in scope. They're an immigrant from Korea, and so we talk a lot about cultural differences and what's hard about those, and what's funny and like cool about them. And I think that that perspective has been really, really helpful for me. I will say I tend to unintentionally end up with mentees from all around the world, but who have ended up in North America. So my other mentees are also people who I think give me a lot of those international perspectives that I maybe wouldn't get to have otherwise. And in exchange, I think I provide sort of the framework and the guidelines for kind of what they can pursue in their careers and support that. It's, I think, really rewarding for both of us, at least I hope so, because I think it helps us both keep persevering when things get tough. And sometimes you just need another perspective to be able to adapt or to respond to a circumstance that isn't what you expected.
Yeah, also similar to Tabby, I would say, I definitely have a few different mentees, and I think some of them it has happened even a little funny. Like I hadn't realized that I was someone's mentor for a while until they had then said it to me, and I remember feeling like, oh wow, like I didn't realize what I was saying, or our interactions were this powerful to you, and I think that was a really exciting moment. But it also caused me to reflect a little bit and to think about, well, I haven't viewed it that way because I get just as much out of those conversations. And so, I didn't think I was really providing guidance or anything because I'm learning so much too. And so I think, that has been with people I've worked with. And so that most recent interaction is someone with work. And I think for me, it was just, an ability to see things with a different lens, from someone else's point of view and perspective. And like I said, I've gained just as much insight and takeaway from that as well.
Same thing kind of for me too. So with one of the teams that I work with, they all kind of come to me as the linguistic guru of knowing every random fact about a lot of languages. So like last week we got a request for a really rare Native American language pair, and everyone was like, help. What do we do? Where do I even begin? Where do I even start for this? And so I'll lay the groundwork of like, okay, try this, try that. Okay, none of our regular things that we do are working. So we're going to have to go. And it's not even out of the box thinking. There is no box. It's basically like in Back to the Future where it's like, there are no roads. Well, that's where we're going. Like we're building a road. So those I really like, and they can definitely, I think they get excited too. They've told me, because I get so excited about it, because it's like, nobody else has done this before, so we're doing this. So it's, I wish I could say more about different things, but it's cool. That's the really fun part of my job, because then they're like, how do you know this and where do you find this? So they're like starting to call me the atlas or the encyclopedia. And that's kind of a cool feeling of like, wow, everybody thinks I'm like the world atlas over here. That's really cool. Um, and yeah, it's like when you realize that, it's like, wow, I didn't realize I was really making that much a difference, but it's really awesome. But yeah, that's my example.
It's really great to hear about the little hidden gems that you discovered through those kinds of relationships. And I'm glad to hear that you've all learned things from having those experiences with mentees. I'm curious if there are any other, I guess, following up on this idea, this theme of hidden gems that you've experienced through those relationships that you can share about. This could be something as simple as your mentee reaching out to you for an opportunity or asking for a recommendation, a referral to something, anything that comes to mind in that instance.
So I guess, Dason, I'm going to call you out a little, but I think you and I have almost like a cross mentorship relationship in a lot of ways. Like our friendship is very much about talking through what each of us is working on and like coming up with ideas on like, well, what do you know about this? Or, hey, I'm looking into, this kind of a program. What do you think about that? And I think that cross mentorship model is something that people often don't think about. I think there's this idea of like someone in a position of power and someone who's more junior than them. But a lot of times, like your mentors are also your friends, it's the people you're surrounding yourself with. And they're going to see something and they're going to be like, hey, I saw this exhibit that made me think of you. Like, I think you'd like it. You should check it out. Or they'll say, hey, I think, this job that my friend was talking about that they're hiring for at their work, I think maybe that might be something you'd be interested in. And I think those are maybe the moments that I think are kind of like hidden gems, is those friends that you have a relationship with where you can really like dig a little deeper and like do a little bit of self-reflection so that the other person also knows like what you're looking for and what your goals are.
Yeah, Tabby, I couldn't agree more, that I think you find mentors don't always have to be, someone who's been there before or walked with you. I think something I've found that I struggle with sometimes is just trying to take on too much and keep it bottled in. And I found unexpectedly that, just by opening up to someone or not pretending everything's totally fine and just being really honest and vulnerable, I've gotten some great advice and just some great new perspectives or ways to look at things by people that I wouldn't have thought of, or probably wouldn't have said like this friend of mine would be great for this particular issue, but just in casual conversation, it came up by not trying to kind of be the hero and pretend everything's okay all day, every day, because it's not. And so I think that's definitely a big takeaway, or some, hidden gems of just talking to someone about something that I was like, this, you won't know what I'm talking about, but here's what's going on. And then it's like, oh, wow, like that was a great piece of advice or perspective.
Thank you all for sharing that and considering, what other hidden gems there might be in the relationships, I guess the mentors that you've come across, or even in your friendships and relationships. Tabby, I do think that's something that does stand out and has been incredibly impactful for me, just knowing that you're a great person to be in touch with. And as we have developed our friendship and it's grown, that we can share on behalf of our experiences, no matter how different they may be. There's always something of value to gain from those conversations. And I think that's what helps to propel the relationship. We do actually want to save some time for questions, and I see that we have one here in the chat. And I'm going to extend this to you all. If whoever wants to follow up on this, please do. But the question is, would you suggest finding a mentor that has a lot of the same interests, or is it better to find someone different than you to challenge you in new ways?
I would say that I find that I have both. And I think that having sort of a balance of both is really important. So having someone that's pretty similar and is able to kind of connect and understand, you know, my path and my journey and how I think, I find that really valuable in not having to explain myself or, you know, just really having that connection. But then I also have found that I've been, you know, I've tried so many new experiences because I've talked to people or I've seen people do things that are scary to me or foreign. But I think that's such a good way for personal growth, is to really kind of test your own boundaries and limits by really looking at, you know, what people are doing that are different than you, that, you know, seem exciting, but you don't know if you can do it or can you handle it. And so I think, you know, looking at my past experiences, I definitely feel like I've needed that balance of having each type in my life.
I would echo that. I also think it helps to have like one interest in common sometimes. So it doesn't have to be you have everything in common. I mean, Dason and I have a lot of things that are very different about our lives. But I think for us, the original thing that we found out we had in common is we're both J.R.R. Tolkien fans. So we went to a really cool museum exhibit, and that was where we started talking and finding other common ground. And so I think that can be sometimes a way to lead in, is finding something that you have in common with someone, even if they are really different from you. And I do think for me, I find if someone's fairly different from me, the challenge is helpful because it makes me think of perspectives that I wouldn't otherwise. But I think in thinking of someone as really different from me, I often end up finding out that we're not as different as I originally thought. We actually typically end up having a lot more commonality, even if maybe that initial interest isn't the same thing.
Thank you all for sharing those considerations as well. I mean, that was an excellent question. I think just following up on some of what you both said, it's important to keep in mind how powerful diversity can be. I think when you consider the different backgrounds that people come from, and really having a chance to have some more insight on what experiences that they have prior to you meeting them, or their values or their interests, it really does challenge you to think about yourself and where you stand within that. And it can be a great opportunity to expand on some of your goals and some of the things that you've considered pursuing. So really do keep that in mind. You know, having those differences or sharing some of those interests one way or another, it still offers you an opportunity to grow. Well, we do want to leave a few more minutes for anyone that wants to ask a question. Are there any more questions out there in the audience? We do have one more here. So the question is, we've talked about teamwork, networking, leadership, and goal setting. Can some of you share about the experiences related to agility and perseverance? Maybe working with someone who needed to continue on their path or needed encouragement. How has that come up in your experiences? And can you speak a little bit more about that?
So I have, I guess, examples from both directions. So when I was in seventh grade, I made the terrible decision that I wanted to be a cheerleader because I thought it would make me popular. Turns out, if you're really clumsy and not good at sports, joining an athletic team does not actually make you popular. It just makes you miserable. But at the time, I really, really didn't want to keep going with it. I thought, this is like all of the other kids are being mean to me. Everything's hard. I'm tired. I don't want to do this. And I remember my mom actually really pushing me to persevere through it. She made the point that, you know, we'd already paid for it. It wasn't free to do. It was something that I, you know, didn't really want to do. And it was really, really far outside of my comfort zone, as it turned out. I didn't become best friends with everyone on the team or anything, but I did improve athletically. And it led me to explore other kinds of dance. And I'm still an Irish step dancer. I actually am an Irish step dance instructor as of the summer. And I think I wouldn't have found that had I not been really pushed to like keep going, even though it wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to do. So I think that's kind of on the perseverance side. On the agility side, I had an employee who I was actually I think the third person to work with her in a training capacity, and she was really struggling. And I think for her, part of the reason she was struggling was everyone kept taking the same approach in showing her something. And I think the agility is why we had a lot of success. Um, we tried, setting some different guidelines about how she would reach goals. Tried different measurements of like, how are we going to time this? How are we going to set this up? Like, is it something where you just need to push through and get faster? Or is it something where you're actually having a mental block about this? And so you're not even understanding what I'm saying anymore because you're so stressed out. And so I think being agile and coming up with different ways to work together was really what led to her success. She went on to be very successful at what she was working on. She ended up moving to our Tokyo office and was very successful there. And I think that experience really showed me how critical agility is when you're the one who is the mentor, because sometimes things aren't going to go the same way as it's maybe gone before. And so you have to try different things together to kind of reach those goals.
I would maybe add on to what Tabby was saying too. I think when it comes to perseverance, do something that absolutely terrifies you, but don't view it as a failure. So I used to be completely introverted, but the only place that I could speak in front of people was on stage. And so I joined drama club. And then there was a foreign exchange student my senior year, and we became best friends. And Mandy helped me break out of my shell, and it made college easier. And then I started hanging out with more and more different people from different cultures. And I realized that, okay, I'm not really afraid of people after all. It's just I didn't have a common ground with other people that I had known since kindergarten. Um, so we just all had completely different interests, which is totally fine. But yeah, do something that literally scares the heck out of you. Like when it came time for me to pick a degree, my parents were like, okay, you're fluent in German, you've studied Polish. Here's the books for Chinese, Russian, and Arabic. Pick a language, stick with it for 4 years because you're probably going to have a job with that. So I did. I picked Russian and I picked military history. And I'm one of those very few people who kept both degrees, but I still kept making myself take different classes for different things. And I totally am horrible at business. I failed an international business class, and yet I work in international business and am getting a master's in international relations. So I just didn't click with that one prof, but that doesn't mean that it's an absolute failure. So that's something that I learned with that. But I mean, there's going to be things that you don't want to do, but you should do it anyway because you're probably going to learn something from it. Like right now, I am terrified of percentages. I never learned percentages somehow. I could sing you the quadratic formula because we had to learn it to the Notre Dame fight song, but I don't know how to do basic percentages. And my boss keeps having me like do percentages on calls with her now because there's these business analytics that I have to give. And I'm sitting there like, I don't know how to math. That's terrifying that I'm in my 30s and I'm on calls with directors and have to do basic mathematics and am terrified of doing it, but I do it and I'm getting better at it. So you just have to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, even if you don't want to do it, because you probably will have to do it at some point. That's my advice.
If I may, I just want to make a comment about all those answers because I think that is that hits it in the nail, right? Like the nail on the head, because that's really where the growth happens, right? When you're uncomfortable, you're doing something that it's outside of your comfort zone. And Megan, I will say I'm very surprised about your comment being an introvert, but I do relate to that comment that you made on the fact that you find something where you're comfortable doing something uncomfortable, right? So for you, that was acting. So that's perfect. And for Tabby, you talking about like, being a cheerleader, you still persevered. You just shift the mode in which you would do something that was outside of your comfort zone. So that, I think that's awesome. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and there was a former academic professor talking about like, look, my best advice to people who want to get their PhDs is like, think about your ideas for what you want to do, your thesis and dissertation, and don't spend too much time trying to find the solution. Just move on and think about it as a part of your journey and stop. So like if it didn't work out, not that you're not going to persevere doing your thesis or your dissertation, is that you're going to find another topic that clicks better with you, but you're going to still get the experience of having to do that and having to present. So that connected it all for me. So I appreciate you all sharing that.
Thank you for helping to bring that into perspective, Manny. And really, again, just keying in on this theme of perseverance, having those opportunities to persevere and grow through things that you might not have expected to experience, or might not have expected to come across, but ultimately still lead you to where you need to be. We do have one last question here, and want to make sure that we cover this. It's a great question, actually, and curious to hear what your responses are to this. Have any of you received advice from your mentor that you didn't take?
I can think of one thing in particular. I would say a few years ago, I was really sort of struggling to figure out what I wanted to do next with life, right? Like I felt like I was getting to a certain age and I've been doing the same thing and what do I want to do next? And someone I consider a mentor said, you should just move to another country and just live there for, a few months. And I really thought about it and I was really, unsure. I thought that was a really great way to kind of take a break, right? Like escape from the day to day, get a new perspective. And then kind of the more I thought about it, the more I realized the things that I felt like I was struggling with weren't going to go anywhere if I just left the country. And so while I kind of appreciated the perspective and the idea sounded exciting and exhilarating, I think the logical part of me kind of thought, okay, and then, 3 months from now, then what? And so those things are still going to be there when I get back. And so ironically, actually, I had an opportunity come up through work that did allow me to travel for about 6 weeks in a similar time frame. So it kind of unintentionally worked out a little bit, but I did appreciate, that I kind of might let my logic override, I think, a little bit of the advice in that situation.
Yeah, I have some consistent advice that I think I've gotten from a few mentors, and I'm gonna say I'm at a point where I don't know if I will eventually take it or not. And that's been, considering going back to school for a master's degree. It's something that I do think I probably want to do long term, but a lot of the advice I've gotten has been, very much for right now. And I will say I'm not sure what my pathway holds long term. And so I'm struggling with the idea of spending a large investment in time or money on something where I'm not totally sure about it. So I don't know if I won't take that advice from the mentors, but I'm still definitely exploring options with it. Um, but I think there's lots of little advice, right? I think there's lots of things that are maybe small in the moment, but sometimes what a mentor is providing you with is an idea for you to parse out what works for you, as opposed to like, this is the pathway and you must take it. So I think there's probably lots of advice that I haven't taken, but the advice was still helpful because it made me consider different options that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise.
Kind of following up on that, I mean, I definitely view both of my parents as mentors. And I will say that your parents do know things. And if you do something that they say you shouldn't do, and it turns out that they were right, literally, I think there's a meme out there that's like, I'm not going to listen to what mom says. And then, like, literally in your 30s, you're going to be, why aren't you picking up the phone? I am the light of your life and want to tell you about the chicken nuggets I ate for lunch. That's real. A lot of times that's real. But in all seriousness, there's a lot of advice my parents gave me. Like, they know that I am a lifelong learner and I do want to eventually get my PhD. I don't know what I'm going to get in, but it'll be in something, because my dream one day is to guest lecture at Oxford or Cambridge in Tweed, just because I think that'd be fun. But I took a 5-year break after undergrad because I was so burnt out. And literally every 6 months it was, you really need to go back. You really should go back. We know you want to go back. And it took for me to watch Good Will Hunting to be like, I'm ready to go back now. So it's funny, like, just random things that could really inspire you. And it's like, okay, my mentors were right the whole time with this. But like what Tabby was saying, like, you have to do what you want to do when you want to do it and when you're good and ready. And my best advice to you too is, like, with college, you know, if you want to go immediately or you don't want to go immediately, that's totally fine. You don't have to do it in a 4-year chunk. I take one class at a time in grad school because I work full time, and it's impossible. So do it at your own pace and do what you want at your own pace. And if you discover that you don't want to be a nurse and you want to go and be like a rocket scientist instead, totally do that. It's okay to change your mind.
Great points from all of you. I think it's really important to keep that in mind, just considering what other people can share, whether it be a mentor, a mentee. They're all great sounding boards for you to consider, you know, where your inner compass is leading you. It's so important to keep in mind where that person is in their life and what kind of vision or insight that they might have that you don't have, and really try to navigate from there. I do see that we have one more question. I want to check in, Manny. Are we still good on time? Do we have time to take this last question?
Yeah, if we could do it, if we can briefly answer it, and then just because we're bumping into the time, and then I'll make a final remark at the end.
Lovely. All right. So this question is asking, are there any specific mentors in your lives that you've been aware of and the important role that they played? And if they were aware, what specific skills did they want you to improve or consider? Were there any of those skills CFES essential skills? So just to clarify, have the specific mentors in your life been aware of the important role that they played? And if they were aware, what specific skills did they want to improve, want you to improve or consider? Were any of those the CFES essential skills?
So I think I've had a mix of mentors who have known and mentors who I'm going to have to call after this and be like, hey, did you know you were a mentor? Because I don't think that they necessarily would know. But I think almost all of my mentors have focused pretty heavily on the CFES essential skills. I think they might have called them something different. You know, I've heard perseverance called grit. I've heard agility called being adaptable. Like, there's a lot of different ways we talk about it, but I think that very much, you know, a lot of their focus has been on goal setting and on leadership for me, as well as the agility and perseverance parts. I think the parts that they maybe don't talk about or don't set the goals around are networking and agility, but I think that those are things that they then demonstrate themselves and connect me with. And so maybe they're not saying outright, like, yes, you need to work on this or you should be considering this, but they're still bringing in all of those essential skills.
I'll hop in really quickly. So my mentor, the second one I was talking about for my internship, he didn't really realize just how important of a mentor he was until him and his wife flew in for mine and my husband's wedding. And I sat them at the family table with my parents. And it's funny because my mom told me he was sitting there and he's going, wait, we're at the family table? My mom was like, well, yeah, where else would Megan put you? And it was like that moment that it clicked just how important he had been in my life, with helping me, because again, it was an internship to help me like land the role I'm in now. And so I think that that was like the really clarifying moment to him and his wife, that like, you guys, because we did an internship program out of their house. And so it was really like, wow, okay, we really made a difference in this person's life. And yeah, definitely all of the essential skills.
Yeah, I'm reflecting on, you know, some other mentors I had. I played sports a lot growing up, and pretty competitively. And I was, at one point, one of my coaches asked me to be a captain, and I remember thinking, you know, why me? I am not great at this. Like, I'm not a leader. And then I think through, you know, his leadership and watching what he was doing, that to me, you know, made me feel like I was a leader that someone else sort of recognized in me. And so I think that was a really interesting moment I'll never kind of forget back in high school. And so, yeah, that's one that comes to mind for me.
Well, thank you all for obviously taking the time, sharing a little bit more about your background, your stories. I always feel like I walk away with a few things new that I can incorporate in my own life. One of the things I'm gonna challenge you all and those watching is to go out and send a quick note to someone who has mentored you, and share with them how important their dedication and really level of support on your development has been. I'm going to do the same. I can think of a couple right away that have been pretty influential in my life. And with that, I just want to leave you with our next session, which is going to be on agility and perseverance. And it's really about changing career paths. It's going to be in conjunction with one of our programs that we're doing in next month on Early College and Career Awareness Week. And really, it's geared towards those young scholars who are in middle school, who are, you know, in 9th grade. And I think this session alone would be instrumental for them as they develop and tap into their network to ask for mentors in their lives. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be that second week of May. Just check out our website and you'll find more information. So with that, I guess we're good to sign off, right? Thank you again.
Bye. Thank you.